There we go. Sorry about that. I saw somebody I needed to talk to coming out of the courthouse today. But anyway, I'll just start all over. So today's day 7. We did not have court Tuesday or Wednesday or yesterday morning. And yesterday afternoon, I was picking up my sister-in-law from the airport, plus going to the city council meeting yesterday. So I was not able to look in yesterday, but I did know that they started the defense case in chief. So now the defense is it's their turn to shine, and a lot of today was very technical. To be honest, I even wrote down on here boring in big letters, and I noted that the testimony, the jury looked very lost and sort of uninterested. There was a lot of bloviation today and puffing up of the expert witnesses, and that's really all today was a bunch of expert witnesses. They're trying to lay the groundwork for, hey, look, he didn't do anything outside the ordinary. He didn't do anything wrong. This is how they're trained. This is what should have happened. All that kind of stuff. Now, what I found interesting, they had a Mr. McFarland out of Colorado, and I guess he's some kind of digital forensics type guy, and they went through the body cam footage frame by frame. And one of the things that he tried to bring up, and I want to do a video about this because it makes absolutely no sense. Keep in mind, Michael Dean is sitting in the driver's seat of his car. And Officer DeCruz opens up the passenger door, and this is a PT Cruiser, okay? So it's about the size of my car, at least width-wise. I've got, well, I'm not going to say what I have, but it's a small car. It's not like a big thing. And as he went through the video, there are a couple of frames that are incredibly blurry. But what this forensic guy tried to convince the jury of, and tried to convince all of us in the audience of, is that Michael Dean had his left hand. Remember, this left hand is the one furthest away from Officer DeCruz, right? Had his left hand on the wrist of Officer DeCruz, while his right hand was fighting for keys. And so just try to imagine this. If you're sitting in a vehicle, okay, the gun is over here inside the doorway. It's not close. It's right there at the entrance to the car. So it's not like the gun is right here in his face. It's way over there. I mean, if the window was down, it'd be right about where the window was, is where the gun is. And we're supposed to believe that Michael Dean is reaching over with his left hand to grab the gun, and supposedly that his hand is on his wrist, on Officer DeCruz's wrist. And by the way, his right hand is fighting with keys. But remember, he was shot on the right side of the head. Okay, so he would have to essentially keep his head looking generally forward while somehow getting his left hand all the way across his body to grab onto the arm of Officer DeCruz, while also wrestling for keys. And somehow he wasn't shot there, or through there or anything like that. He was shot over here, which means that his head was not facing towards him. Because if you're reaching over like this, why are you going to look that way? If you're trying to wrestle back keys, which that didn't happen. If you're trying to wrestle back keys and you're trying to grab the gun, why are you looking straight ahead? when all the action is to the right. It makes absolutely no sense. And it makes no sense forensically because he got shot here. And you just naturally, I mean, just even if you're sitting on a couch or in a chair, try to reach over about another chair's length and just see how uncomfortable that is to keep your head pointed straight ahead while literally your entire body is turned to the right. So it didn't make sense to me that he was trying to make us believe that these shadows were fingers. He tried, but when the state, thankfully the state came up with its video, which was also, I guess in some way it was the DPS fixed the video to lighten it up to make it brighter or something. And you didn't see any hands on the gun or on the wrist. So I can't believe that the defense is essentially trying to lead the jury down this road that, look, Officer DeCruz didn't shoot him. He shot himself. He's the one that did that. You know, he grabbed the gun and it went off. So it just made no sense at all. Now here's the other thing. So they did, the camera footage is shot at 30 frames per second. They showed one frame where it shows the gun prior to it going off, and then it shows 3 frames later, I'm sorry, yeah, prior to going off, and then 3 seconds later when you've got the muzzle flash, right? And in the first frame, it's completely unobstructed. There's no hands anywhere. You can't see it on the gun. You can't see it on the wrist. But suddenly 3 frames later, when the gun goes off, we're talking 1/10 of a second those 3 frames took to get from one to the other. And what the defense wants you to believe is that Michael Dean, who is allegedly incredibly inebriated at 0.20 blood alcohol content, was able to, in 1/10 of a second, reach up and grab the gun in those 3 frames when you've got a completely unobstructed view of the gun, and then you've got 3 frames later the muzzle flash. So I hope the jury's not buying this the way I'm not buying this, and they see that makes absolutely no sense. You can't tell anything. They went through these videos frame by frame, and it's so dark and it's so blurry. I did not see, and I tried to see this, and as a matter of fact, I'm shaking my head and I'm like, what is he talking about? I don't see that at all. And actually one of the deputies had to come up to me because, you know, you're not allowed to, in the audience, visually give any cues as to what you believe about the testimony, because it might skew the jury. So he had to kind of remind me, nudge me a little bit, because I was like shaking my head. I'm like, I didn't realize I was being as physical as I was. All right, so the next witness came from California. So, you know, the first expert witness was Colorado. Now we've got one from California who is a former police officer, does a lot of training. He's got a PhD, all this other kind of stuff. Got all kinds of California certifications. Oh, and he's been published in Police One magazine. He's got about 7 supposed peer-reviewed articles in different journals and stuff like that. But not including everything in the reports, he says, is a human infallibility. And you see different things than the video, which I thought was interesting. But he's, you know, in some points of this testimony, he says that the discharge of the gun was accidental, and in other points, they tried to blame Michael Dean for the discharge of the weapon. They called it a sympathetic muscle contraction that caused the gun to fire. Then the defense, I'm telling you, this stuff, you can't make it up, is trying to claim that Michael Dean's finger or thumb entered the trigger guard. So not only somehow, while Michael Dean had his wrist, had his left hand on DeCruz's arm with the gun, right? somehow he was able to get his thumb into the trigger guard while his fingers were way over here by his wrist. And at some point, he even tried to say that you could make an outline of his thumb, like this is the way that he was holding it, not like this. He was holding it like this. And somehow it was Michael Dean's finger that, but see, then it would have gone off before you saw the hand on the wrist, not after you saw the hand on the wrist. So I don't know if the defense realizes that they keep contradicting themselves in their own witnesses. You know, you've got witnesses that talk about these sympathetic muscle contractions, and then you've got witnesses saying, "Oh no, Michael Dean had his finger in the trigger." Well, which is it? Was it? And maybe they're also trying to just say that, well, we just don't know for sure. I think the defense is trying to say, you know, we just can't be sure. Look, there are all these other options. It was either a sympathetic muscle contraction, and if that's the case, it was still the fact that he had a gun pointed at another man who was not a lethal threat when the gun went off. So you still got that negligence there. And you still got that criminal negligence, that criminal responsibility for that, even if it was a sympathetic muscle contraction or whatever. And then the other thing was when the state was doing a cross-examination, you know, I have never, well, and I haven't seen many, to be honest with you, I haven't watched many live cases, but I've read a lot of testimony of expert witnesses, and I haven't read or seen, the few that I've seen, expert witnesses that were so combative. And this guy was so in the tank for DeCruz, and obviously he's a defense witness, I get that, but he's supposed to be an expert witness. He had no problem getting into DeCruz's head. He had no problem getting into Michael Dean's head. But when other things were being brought up, well, I can't get into anyone's head, you know, and when they were trying to say, isn't it possible that, you know, could he have done this? Or, you know, was his mentality this? Oh, well, I can't get into anyone's head. But that's exactly what all of his testimony was about, was getting into DeCruz's head. So that's it. Really, today was just a whole bunch of expert witnesses, a lot of technicalities and technical stuff, a lot of time wasted on, oh, look at me and all these certifications I have, because, yes, you have to certify the witness. If you've got an expert witness, you've obviously got to certify them. But by golly, they spent so much time certifying this guy. And he just talked so much about himself. I think it just turned the jury off. Looking at the jury, I made sure I was watching them. I mean, they did not seem enthralled or in any way, like, I don't know. They just weren't paying attention to all this nonsense. And I think they were thinking like I was, come on already, get on with it. Let's get on with the testimony. Okay, we get it. You're an expert. You got all this training. You got all this education, blah, blah, blah. So that's today. The trial will begin again next week on Monday at 9:30. I do plan to be back here for that. Well, anyway, I do plan to be back here. If I don't have a video around lunchtime on Monday, then you know that something came up. And if I don't have a video around this time on Monday, then something came up as well. Otherwise, you guys take care, be safe, be free, and I will talk to you Monday.